training program covers actually setting up your privacy program. A quick recap: so far, we've talked about the external variables, the regulations, the reputational risk, all of which require you to have this program. So let's get into the weeds of how you set up your program in this lesson. So, this part of the lesson talks about who the key players are for your privacy program, who within the company needs to be at the table and provide guidance. The four key players, this is based on my experience across multiple companies, are of course the engineers and the product managers, the attorneys, the security and privacy leaders within the company, and then of course the C suite leadership. So, let's go through these one by one. The engineers and the product managers are critical because they are the ones who build the services that make your roadmap. They consume the data. These services actually make money for your company. They also maintain the infrastructure that connects the users to these services. So they build the software and then they build the hardware. Those are the two foundations that hold up the stool of your company, if you will. The engineers also access this data for analysis and research, so there are privacy considerations there. And of course, all of these folks understand the technology, but not really the law. So they are critical in shaping a privacy program. Then you have the attorneys. They interpret the laws and the regulatory sentiment that governs the company. They use that information to assess the risk based on what the company does. They represent the company's decisions to the outside world vis-a-vis privacy. That is, they defend decisions in the court of law and the court of public opinion. And they understand the law, but not the technology. So you kind of have the inverse of what you have with the engineers. And then, of course, you have the privacy and security leaders. This tends to be sort of a separate team within most companies that is not part of conventional engineering, but that typically sits outside legal as well. These folks, as much as possible, try to build tools to protect sensitive data. So they have some automation and best practices typically in place. They also understand the touch points between the company and the customers. That is the right way to access the company's data and the wrong way, so they can protect the company. Both we are the front door where legitimate users come from, and the back door where typical hacking or inappropriate access of data happens. So they tend to be the connective tissue between the law and the technology, that is, between the attorneys and the engineers. They will be key parts of your security and privacy program within the company. And then, of course, you have the C suite. These are the folks who are not part of the day to day decision making at the tactical level, but when it comes to the strategic level, they make investment and prioritization choices. They are accountable for growth targets. That is, when Wall Street wants specific numbers, they are accountable for that. When investors want a specific return, they're accountable for that. And therefore, they have to balance the two of these together and are essentially defined by their risk appetite. So if they feel like there is appetite for risk and that will funnel growth, they will lean in a little bit. If they feel that there is potential for long term reputational damage, they will lean back out a bit. So they are indispensable in setting the right privacy and security culture. They have to balance the need to be cautious and do the right thing, right alongside making sure that they give the business the incentive and the oxygen to grow. So the right security program at a high level will have all four of these stakeholders collectively talking to each other and making a collective sign off consensus on these key privacy decisions. There is complete transparency around what the choices are, what the risks are, why certain decisions can be taken, why they cannot be taken, and what was taken when, for what reason. So if something backfires 6, 9 months from now, you know who took what decision and why. There needs to be a continuous paper trail and a risk assessment so you do not make decisions based either on a sense of unbridled ambition or because you felt that you need to be overcautious. There needs to be an iterative touch point sequence, some sort of a meeting, some sort of continuous engagement model where these folks talk to each other continuously and nurture the program and make sure that there is a level of evangelism. So when the privacy program speaks to the company as a whole, all four of these leaders speak with the same voice. The engineer shouldn't feel that the attorneys or the security folks or the privacy folks are giving them orders. The attorney shouldn't feel that the engineers are running amok. It needs to be a collective program. In future chapters, we're going to talk about how some of this actually happens, what these engagements look like, what these tools look like, what should legal do, how should engineering stay engaged, how do you build a culture where there are boundaries, but there is also cooperation. But so far, this is typically how you set up a privacy program that essentially represents the company as a whole.